Hello everyone, and welcome to my first video in a long time. It's my own fault. I have had other stuff to do, so I haven't been able to continue with my videos. However, today I have a very special video. This time it is a little bit of an introduction to what is Dungeons and Dragons and why should you play it. So first off, what is Dungeons and Dragons? It's a tabletop role-playing game. What the hell does that mean? It means technically two things. It means it's a game which you play on a tabletop. It could be like Monopoly is a tabletop game. Technically, it's more a board game, but it's kind of the same thing. You're kind of playing it on a table with dice or figures or something like that, right? Also, there's a game part of this. The game part is the mechanics of when do you succeed in trying to do things, when do you fail trying to do things, and what can you do and how much can you do it. Things that kind of limit you, so you can't just do whatever you want as much as you want, to make it fun, to make it challenging. So that's kind of the game, tabletop game part, and that's the role-playing part. For my sake, 95% of Dungeons & Dragons is role-playing at least. Or it should be for my sake. I mean, that's how I feel. And the role-playing part is more like you make up a character and then you play that character. You react like that character would. You try to emphasize with that character's wants and needs. You try to interact with the other players who are also doing the same and playing their characters. So you're kind of creating your own little storyline between you, even though it might just be chit-chat. If it's chit-chat as a character to another character, that can be adding a lot to a story technically, because it makes your characters more real, it makes them more believable, it makes them more human, even, of course, if you're not playing human. But I think that's the basis, very deep down, of what those two parts mean. So, how do you play Dungeons & Dragons? Normally you have, again, two parts. You have a Dungeon Master, which can also sometimes be called a Game Master. That is the same thing, it's just two different words for the same thing, I guess. And then the other part is the players. So, what is the difference? So, the Game Master, Dungeon Master, is the person who kind of makes the world come alive around you. It's he has to, like, he or she, sorry, has to kind of make up the NPCs, the non-player characters that you meet, the people giving you quests, the monsters you're fighting, and all these kind of things. You kind of have to make up the personality and pretend to be them or act as them. So he'll also roleplay, but he'll roleplay as the people, either in a pre-written campaign or as he has made up himself, if it's a homebrew campaign as well. It depends on what you're playing. So he basically makes the world come alive, and he reacts to what the players perform of actions and what they do, but he also gives them things to react to. So it could be that the players go into a shop, and then how does this person behind the counter react to these players showing up? Maybe he likes them, maybe he don't like them, maybe he would really like to sell them something, maybe he's blind, maybe he doesn't even know they're there, maybe he's sleeping, you never know. And then the players have to react to the fact that something is coming their way in the way of interaction. It could also be, again, the players are in a forest and then they get ambushed by goblins. Now suddenly they have to react to that. It's again something the Game Master have sprung on them, so they have to, as the characters, react to the situation. There will be some dice rolls involved and stuff to kind of determine what happens, but deep down, basically, the Game Master is the person who's kind of trying to make this whole adventure come to life, make the storyline progress. Sometimes it's not a linear storyline, sometimes it can be whatever you want, completely sandbox, where you can do whatever you want, and this Game Master just reacts to what's going on based on maybe some rules that's been set by this campaign you're playing in, like there's this lord, this king who's controlling the country and he's doing it this way, so if they do this to break the rules, there are consequences to that. So deep down, basically, he is the he's the reaction to what the players do, but he's also a accelerant in the form that he is pushing them, sometimes without them knowing. That's a very important part, that sometimes you can push your players in a direction, but make them think they do want to walk that path themselves. That's one of the interesting things about being Game Master. Sometimes it can be really tricky. So that's a lot about the Game Master part without going into full details. But second part, players. That's probably why you're here. You're probably here because you want to play Dungeons and Dragons and you don't want to be a Game Master for the first time. You play, that's not always a good place to start. Sometimes it can be a lot. But as a player, it's slightly different. So as a player, the only thing you really need to do is you have to make a character and you have to kind of play your character. Some role play more than others. Like I say, I think it's 95% of the characters. That's where most of the fun comes from. It's not like you sit down and play Risk or Monopoly. It's a different kind of game, because in those games you play to win. In Dungeons and Dragons, you can win the fights, but when do you really win Dungeons and Dragons? When you hit level 20? Because that's gonna take you a long time. I think you win when you have fun interactions and you have fun in a session. I think that's what makes you win, because you have to remember that even though that you're a group of people, none of you are technically the hero. You're all the heroes, and you make the stories together. So everyone has to be kind of equal and have equal amount of fun. I think that's what you say. English. Well, so what is a pre-written campaign and what is a homebrew campaign, and why am I bringing this up? I'm bringing this up because there's a few different ways to play Dungeons and Dragons. Most of the time, as far as I have noticed, it ends up being pre-written campaigns that someone have written already, where you have a certain storyline prepared for you. So as the game master, you just need to buy this book, read through it, and then you kind of have to follow that. There's room for improvisation, of course. That's also a big part of Dungeons and Dragons. But deep down, it's already been made for you. You have the entire world, the entire setting, everything has been made up for you. Sometimes there might even be characters made up already for the players. I don't think that's as fun, but I guess that can be a thing too. But pre-written campaigns, there's a few examples. Like currently I am playing Curse of Strahd as a player. I have also tried the Mines of Phandelver and some other ones. So what this means is that these have their own theme again going on. And that's a pre-written campaign because it's already pre-written. Then we have the homebrew. Now the homebrew is a more tricky thing to get around explaining, because it can literally be anything. It can be that you want to play Dungeons and Dragons in space. It can be that you want to play Dungeons and Dragons in modern times. It can be a lot of those things, but most of the time, usually people play Dungeons and Dragons because they want to be in a fantasy setting, and that means that the Dungeon Master might create their whole entire world. They might create their own gods, maybe even their own classes, their own stories, their own history lines. It can be a lot of things that you need to work out as a game master. You need to create all these big maps, and you need to try to work out in your head how everything fits together and such. A few examples of that would be Matthew Mercer have made Critical Role, both the two campaigns, Season 1 and Season 2, both written by him, completely made up by him. I am designing my own pre-written campaign as well. So I know it is a lot of work. There's a lot of stuff that goes into it. But again, that's a homebrew campaign. It can be very similar, it can follow the rules exactly. You might just follow any other setting that you have encountered in D&D, and then you decide, I'm gonna change the names, I'm gonna change some of these things around. I don't like this rule, for instance. You can also technically make a house rule, as it's called, and change some of the basic rules if you feel you need to. I'd be careful with that, because sometimes it might seem like a good idea to begin with if you change something as a game master with your own homebrew campaign, but then 5 seconds later you realize you fucked up, because now someone is super overpowered, or there's some kind of hole in your idea that kind of wasn't thought through. So try not to change too much to begin with. If you know what you're doing, if you really want to do something in particular, sure, go for it. But that's a whole different video altogether. This is just a quick rundown of what you can and cannot do. And it's a quick introduction to playing Dungeons and Dragons in the first place. So now we know what the difference is between a homebrew and a pre-written campaign. There's some things that you might have noticed, like people, they roll dice, they have dice trays, they have dungeon master screens, they have these cards with all the spells, and there's so many different things you could do now, and minis, you have many minis and stuff like that. It's like a whole different world of accessories. So as a beginner player, what you should really get one set of dice, and when I mean one set of dice, I mean the ones that have 7 different types. Just get one. You can always buy a million later. You're not gonna need more than one set to begin with to see if this is even something you want to do. If you can find a mini that looks a little bit like the character that you want to play, you can probably get away with that for about 10 Australian dollars, and then you'll get 2 in a pack. If you buy the original Nullschulers, whatever they're called. But some games you don't even need it. Talk to the game master who you're playing with. Once you figure this out, you might not even need to buy a mini. It can be a cool representation, but you can literally just use, I don't know, a little cork or something. It's more so you know where you are on the battlefield if you're fighting and stuff like that, but that's not super important. It's nice to have? Nah, you don't really need it. This is as a player, as a player all you really need is a set of dice and a pen, and then you can print out a character sheet online, a million places. I think you can even copy one from the back of Player's Handbook. So what I would recommend as a new player playing for the first time is find a group where someone's willing to guide you through the creation process of how to make a character. I also am going to make some videos about how to make a character in Dungeons and Dragons, just a basic one. And later on I'll add in some flair of how to make your characters absolutely amazing. Not strong. I would like to point that out, that your character is not amazing because it's strong. Your character is amazing because it's fun. Anyway, so as a new player, get a set of dice. That's all you really need. If you are 100% sure that Dungeons and Dragons is for you and you definitely want to play, you can pick up one of these, Player's Handbook. This is almost enough for everyone once they start playing Dungeons and Dragons. There's only a few times where some people want more spells, that's not in here. Want to play Dungeon Master and you want to have some tools for doing that. Or some races that aren't in here that you want to play. But forget about all that for now. To begin with, get a set of dice and find a group to play with. Find somewhere where they play. Also make sure that you're playing the same version. The one I just showed you is 5th edition, 5e. That's the most recent version of Dungeons and Dragons. That's easily one of my favorites, actually. I used to play Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and I really liked that, but it took hours without questioning to make a character, even if you knew what you wanted to do. This is easier. It's easier for new beginners. It's easier for everyone. And it's vague enough later on for you to, as an advanced and experienced player, to kind of change things around a little bit. But deep down, dice, maybe the book. If you're 100% sure, you can probably join a group where they'll have more than one book, and you can kind of share them as well. So you can get away with that maybe for what, I don't know, set of dice, maybe $10. If you go to one of these dice machines that I talked about in my previous video, I think you can do it for $2. $2 to play Dungeons and Dragons. Come on. That's pretty cheap, right? When you go to a session, bring your own pen, bring a little notepad if you have one, to write notes on, questions, whatever. If not, you can always write it on the back of your character sheet. Anyway, so that is again what you should get. This was as a player, as a dungeon master. I would recommend you getting the Dungeon Master's Handbook. I have one right up there, but I forgot to take it down. It's right there. Get that one. You don't have to. Now, the reason I say you don't have to is that most of what you need is in the player's handbook. Dungeon Master's Guide helps you create factions, NPCs, and such. But kind of get around the first few times without even having any idea of what's in that book. You'll be fine. Most importantly, you just need to read through Player's Handbook a little bit and see how the whole system works. It can be helpful to have the Monsters Manual, because you're gonna throw some monsters at them. If not, Google can still help you with most of that too. So you can again get off with this pretty cheap. You also need at least one set of dice. Some Dungeon Masters like to play with a Dungeon Master screen. Some people don't like that. I'd say it's a good idea to have one, but it's not needed. You can make a Dungeon Master screen out of 3 pieces of cardboard if you need to. So again, you don't have to spend more money there. So deep down, you basically just need dice. So, I'm preparing to play D&D for the first time as a player. What should I do? What should I prepare? First thing you should do is, you should, at this point already I talked to a game master about what type of character you'd like to play, if you know. He might have already have an idea or something like that. If not, that's okay too. Sometimes the first session 0 or some people call it, is a session where everyone also kind of gauges each other and see if they want to play at all and if everything fits. Like, not everyone plays D&D the same way. So just because one person is doing it one way doesn't mean that that's the way it always is. It can always be different. What you should bring your dice if you have any. You should bring a pen, maybe some paper to write on. Whatever you have that's relevant to bring. If you have some fancy dice tray or something, you can bring that too. That's up to what you have. But yes. Other than that, what you should prepare for is that the first part of this session is most likely going to be character creation, where you're going to sit down, all of you at the table, maybe you're going to have a little chat about what you'd like to play. You might not at this point know, but then there might be someone here who can help you, someone who can guide you to what you would like to play, depending on what type of character you had in mind. Prepare for that. It's going to be a little bit of chat. Then there's going to be first important part is once you kind of figured out what type of character you want to play, you will be rolling some dice to determine what what your skills are, what your ability scores are, which kind of is telling you how good your character is at certain things and such. I'll get into that later as well. So there will be a little bit of rolling with dice to determine that. A little bit of math, unfortunately. Math. Just to get all the skills correctly into the right places. Dungeon Master will, of course, help you with that. Once that's settled in and session starts, if the session even starts the first time, that depends on what the Game Master wants to happen. And if he's prepared to start playing the first time, or if he just has a session where everyone kind of makes their character together and meets each other for the first time. Maybe you might never even have met these people before, which is perfectly fine. I met my group online, and it's a pretty good bunch. So you rolled all your stats, you have all your character, and now the game starts. Now what? So usually the Game Master will start out with a small introduction of the world or something that you need to know, pending to what you need to react to now, what's going on. Maybe you're all waking up in the same room unconscious without any memory. That's pretty used. Maybe you all sitting in the same bar and you all get attacked by goblins. It can be a lot of different things. Usually the introduction is mostly a tool to push the players into a group with one connected goal. It can be quite tricky sometimes because some players, it's in their nature to fight these things if they see them coming. They aren't easy to deal with if that happens, but for this time being, just kind of go with it a little bit, just kind of see where the Game Master wants you to go, what it feels like. It might also be pretty open that there might not be a lot of story to directly dive into. That can be tricky as a first time player, but usually you would have some kind of path right in front of you. So what do I do now? I have this thing happening. So what you should do is you should think, my character is not me. My character is this person. What would this person do in a situation like this? Would he run away from the goblins? Would he defend himself with his honor, with his massive greatsword? Or would he just confused look at everything and assess the situation further before making a choice? Maybe he'll be hiding. It can be a lot of different things. But one way or another you'll be forced to react to it, at least. And a good thing to do is to, once you're playing, make sure that you give everyone else an equal opportunity to play their characters, to speak, so everyone has an equal time at playing. If you keep telling everyone what you want to do, then you're taking time away from them a little bit, from what they might want to do. But usually you'll end up being bunched together as a group. Just remember, everyone is there for the same reason, and you should leave everyone space for them to do their thing too. That's it. Sometimes some players have no clue what to do, and if you have an idea, you could just say, hey, I think we should do this. Do you think that's a good idea? And you can kind of try to lead them to the point. Maybe you as a new player will spot something that someone else haven't seen. That's happened a million times before. So sometimes you just have to kind of go with where the plot's taking you. I mean, sometimes the plots can be something where you're like, oh, I don't want to do that. But the Game Master have prepared these things, and there might be some fun events or something happening down the track that you didn't think of. Also, sometimes it might not be what you think it is. Sometimes you're gonna get, like, ambushed when you think you're doing something else. So I'd say try to give everyone space to be there with you instead of also being there. Try to work together. Try to get to know these people that you're playing with. You might not even, like I said, have met them before, so their characters might be very hostile against your character because they don't know you. That doesn't mean that the player is. There's a very big difference between the player and the character, and that's the very important part of the role-playing aspect as well, is that my character might be a complete asshole, but I might be a nice guy. Or maybe it's the other way around. You never know. You never know. But remember that you're all there together, and it's gonna be weird for everyone. If you feel weird and odd the first time, it's okay. It's completely okay. It is really strange. First time I sat down and played Dungeons and Dragons, it was with 6 people I had never met in my life. 4 of them were almost twice my age, and it was strange. But it was strange, and it was okay to be strange, because everyone felt slightly strange. And that's when it kind of slowly sunk in that it's okay, it's a little weird, but it's kind of fun. It's just fun. Yeah, and it kind of stuck with me. So it's okay to be weird. It's okay it feels odd. It will go away. It's just because this is weird. It's like when you have one of those assignments in school and you get partnered up with the 5 people you never ever talk to, and then suddenly you have to do this thing together. It feels a little bit like that the first time. But these people might become your friends. You never know. Usually, when people play in a group together for a while, they end up becoming friends. It happens by itself. And you have some fun adventures together, and yeah, it's gonna be okay. Trust me, it'll be fine. Sometimes there's some groups that don't really work with certain people. That's okay too. Not everyone does it the same way. Some people like to play one way, some people like to play another way. It's okay to also say, okay, I think I'm gonna not play with this group anymore for this specific reason. But I'd say don't think about that to begin with. It's very rare that happens, in my opinion, and it's okay. I mean, we can make these choices if we want to, but as a new beginner, you need some time to assess everything a little bit more than someone who already played like a million times. Like, I can go into a session, I can play the first session, and after that I can be like, okay, they're doing it this way, I don't like that, I'm fine with them doing that, I just don't want to be part of it because that doesn't really work with me and the way I want to play. So that's fine for me, but as a new player you might not, you can't really see all these different nuances and aspects of it. So I'd say the first few times just kind of go with it, even if it feels a little strange or something isn't exactly like you thought it would be. Just hang in there. Maybe it'll make more sense later. Maybe it'll make some kind of breakthrough and you'll understand it. Or maybe you never will, and then you'll end up going to somewhere else. That's fine too. Other than that, you should be prepared for that your character might die. This is gonna suck, your character. The first time you lose your character, if you put a lot of effort into making this character, it's gonna suck. But most first characters doesn't have a lot of backstory and such, usually. So you might be okay. But your first real character that dies, ooh, that's not necessarily fun. That's tricky. But good thing is we can always make a new one. That was a little bit of a info dump. I'm sorry about that. I hope this kind of helps with the basic information about what Dungeons and Dragons is. A quick rundown of what couldn't be a normal session could be: the players are in an inn together, the inn might get attacked by goblins again. So was it fucking goblins? The players end up fighting these things while the people in the bar are getting killed, and then you end up becoming the hero of this inn because you prepared. Sorry, not prepared. You fought all these evil goblins and you won. And then someone will approach you and say, "Hey, you did pretty good. I got another job for you because you seem to be pretty handy, you guys." You end up all getting hired for another job, and then it just snowballs from there. Believe me, it will snowball really, really quickly. That's pretty much it, and at the end, you're gonna fight some big bad guy, and yeah, hopefully you save the world or something like that. That's usually that's the usual plotline, somewhere faded in between there. That's what you can kind of expect. Another thing I didn't mention is that there's also two ways of playing D&D in the aspect that there's a one-shot and then there is a D&D campaign. Most of what I said is kind of relevant for a D&D campaign. A lot of it is transferable to a one-shot, but the difference is one-shots. It's basically what it sounds like. It's one. It's just one time you play these characters in this setting, in this session that might be between 4 and 10 hours depending on how long you play. But it's a standalone game, or at least it's a series of standalone games that aren't necessarily getting continued on again next time. Where the difference is a campaign is a game that starts at maybe level 0, maybe level 3, or whatever the game master have made up. I always recommend starting at level 1 or level 3 as a new beginner, just to kind of understand the mechanics better when you get through the leveling process. And then you kind of keep playing your character, Once you get to level 20, that's a long time though, long time. When you get to level 20, usually that's when the game stops. That's when the game ends. The characters are too powerful to really play. There is examples of continuing to play after that point. It is possible, but there's no more advancement. That's why a lot of people stop at that point. But in theory, if you get to level 20, still want to keep playing, go for it. It'll be tricky for the game master to find enemies that are strong enough to fight a party of level 20s, but it is possible. And if it's for the role-playing aspect you're playing, who cares what level you are? That's not necessarily the fun part. The fun part is solving things together. I think that was pretty much what I wanted to say in this part. From here, I think I'll jump into my next video and I will start explaining how to make your first character for Dungeons and Dragons. So you have a bit of an information video on how to do that at least. It's not gonna be every single option, every single detail, because there is a lot of aspects of that I can't do in just one video. It will fuck your mind up. And if you're playing for the first time, a lot of these options that you also have but not necessarily know of in the player's handbook, don't worry about them the first few times. It will confuse you more if you try to put everything in there together. Stick to the player's handbook, stick to the options you have in player's handbook. You'll be fine. You can always go full in, learn all the other stuff later. But right now, just stick with the player's handbook and the options in there. Alright, that was a interesting, weird video. Talking hypothetically about Dungeons and Dragons. That's not something I've ever done before, but hey, it's the first time for everything. So I guess I'll end my video here, and that will be part 1 of beginner's introduction to Dungeons and Dragons.